Hey guys, so this is going to be the 54th opening that I like to share with you, which is the Shaman opening. So it starts off with f5, d6, which is the basic perpendicular variation, and then you play the rose variation, which most often than not players will respond to f4, which is quite a standard book. And you go to e3, which is leading up to the standard rows again. And of course, if your opponent follows the book to c6, typically most players do not really variate over here. So it's quite easy to enter the shaman opening. So if you go to c6, then you can play f3 to actually launch the shaman opening. So essentially, this is the full sequence. So what happens here is that I think it tends to surprise your opponent a little because not too many people specialize in this opening, and it also limits options for white towards the mid game and towards the end game, and it's fairly intuitive for centralisation for black as well. So these are like pretty much the advantages that you can enjoy when you play this opening. And of course, what you have to do is give up a handicap right from the get-go on as early as the fourth move. You reduce your advantage, and in general, it might be difficult to follow up if you're not well versed in the opening. So you really have to go deep in the book. So I really recommend this for advanced players and above. For players who want to play black for this variation. So let me just play through a typical variation. So let's assume that your opponent actually knows the book sequence. So he might play g5, and then you just jump over to the edge, which is the general preferred sequence. So this entire this entire shape actually over here looks very deceptively poor for black, but in fact it's only just a -4 advantage. But it does seem like, black's discs are scattered all over the place. So the typical follow-up would be white to play c3, and you could play f6, and white goes g6, and you go e6, and white goes c4, and you go b5. So that's the typical sequence on a book sequence. So over there, you would see that black is fairly in the center, probably because you go to the edge and then follow by the cut back into the center while many of the squares in the center are not occupied. So that's the nature of it. And another way is if your opponent plays g6 in response, you could play either f6 or you could play the g5. And if you play the g5, this move over here being the best move for white is not very intuitive. c4 flipping to this in two different directions as early in the opening. It's usually not that advisable, and people who don't know the book probably wouldn't play this move. They would probably play either d3 or e6, and of course the resultant shape is that black gets to centralize fairly easily, and white would then realize that it's actually quite counterintuitive for most of their follow-up moves. So another sequence over here would be for white. Another counter by your opponent commonly played is either c3 or d3. So c3 being more common, you would just go ahead to regroup your disc at d3, and white goes to c4. And typically the sequence follows over here. You can either choose to play e6, you can choose to play d7, you can choose to play b3. Either one works. So yeah, that essentially is the Shaman opening, and I hope you enjoy today's episode. So go ahead and try it. You might actually find that it's quite easy to play the Shaman opening, even though you give up quite a bit of an advantage at the start. So I think this is useful for advanced players playing against maybe advanced or even expert players, but not really that good against world-class players. At least that's what I've been told. So I hope you enjoyed today's session, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.